Browns back at practice here on Monday, day 5 of training camp, but the big news happened on Sunday. Kenny Pickett suffering a hamstring injury in practice on Saturday. The Browns are going to be without him for, at this point, an undisclosed amount of time. We did hear from Kevin Stefanski today, who, like I said, didn't really give us a timetable, didn't sound like it was going to be real long, but Mary Kay, obviously in this four-way quarterback battle, this is a pretty significant development early in camp.
It really is, in large part because the heart of training camp is just starting to happen now. Today was the first day in pads. We were supposed to come back here and see how they reshuffled the quarterback deck. How were they going to dole out those first team reps? And then next week, the team travels to Carolina for a joint practice against the Panthers and the game. And then the week after that, it's 2 practices in Philadelphia and then a preseason game. So this was where the boys were going to separate themselves from the men, and the order was going to start to shake out, and now Kenny cannot be out there on the field. I think it's significant. I think if he misses much more than this week, I think it's going to be hard for him to be ready now for opening day. I think it really helps Joe Flacco's cause. He's getting most of the first team reps now.
Yeah, we'll note that next week they practice on Monday, then they practice on Wednesday, and then they have that game Friday. So there aren't a lot of practices here after this week between now and that first preseason game. And Ashley, it's felt like Kenny Pickett was starting to gain some momentum in this thing.
It really did, and especially on Saturday, watching that sneaky ability he has to move. And you know, they said it happened later in the day on Saturday, and he was doing a lot of scrambling and things like that, some design runs that we saw, but he really was showing off that part of his game. And I think, like, in so many ways, as Mary Kay said, like, the lights had been coming on for him, but unfortunate to have to miss any time when Joe Flacco had such a head start in a Kevin Stefanski style offense.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Joe Flacco because he did take most of the first team reps today. Dillon, Gabriel got some as well, so they were splitting them, but most of them went to Joe Flacco. And Mary Kay, Joe, you know, I know you had a chance to grab him for a couple questions today, and look, he said the right things, but the reality of this is this does represent an opportunity for Joe to maybe grab this thing over the course of this week.
It really does. And I did ask him, you know, he has not been getting as many reps as the other guys. And I asked him, do you want those extra reps? Do you want to be out there practicing? Some guys are fine not practicing too much in this heat and humidity when they've been around for so long, but not Joe. He wants those reps. He finds it to be fun. He wants to get prepared for the season. And when I watched football practice today out here, it looked to me a lot like a starter, a second teamer, and a third teamer out there today. Of course, they only had the 3 quarterbacks. Kenny wasn't out there at all today, but it sort of looked like when we come out here for usual training camp practices in the past, it looked like that to me.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the ball just comes out of Joe's hands differently. You see the confidence. He knows the system so well. So, Ashley, if he gets this whole week to himself, if Kenny's not back by the end of the week, we could be saying on this video on Friday or Saturday that Joe has taken a hold of this thing.
Yeah, I think that is fair, and I think it's kind of where my mind headed immediately after we found out Kenny was going to have to miss time is, again, Joe already sort of had a leg up with knowing this system, and he obviously has that arm, and I think you're going to see that more this week. And as Mary Kay said, it's a big week to have to miss, and only 2 practices next week. Those practices start to dwindle down. We start getting closer. They have to start getting more precious with reps, so time, I feel like, it's just not on Kenny Pickett's side, and we know how unpredictable soft tissue injuries can be too on top of it.
Well, let's spend a little bit of time on what we saw on the field because, Mary Kay, I think you're right. It did feel like that today, but I will say today, overall, the offense and the quarterback play looked a little bit sharper than it has throughout camp on a day when the pads went on. Now, the defense seemed to really relish the opportunity to hit people, and Shedeur Sanders actually got hit at one point when he rolled into some pressure. But I thought overall all 3 quarterbacks had moments, and, of course, it was capped when Shedeur Sanders hit Sal Cannella on a deep ball to end practice, a little catch and run by Cannella. But, again, I do think all 3 quarterbacks looked better today than they have in the first 4 days of camp.
Well, they did, and as we recall, yesterday they put their heads together on offense and they refined some things. And I think they made certain that it was going to look better. I think they fixed some things, and they probably articulated that in the meeting room. They probably simplified a few things, maybe threw some things out, and just streamlined the process. And so it looked more efficient. It looked a little bit more crisp. As you mentioned, of course, the pads were on. It brings things to a whole new level. Just from their, they're not hitting or tackling to the ground yet. It's thud, but that's a loud thud. Okay, so there's good contact. You're going to get hit, and it was just different. And I thought it did look good on the part of the quarterbacks. And again, I think that this is a very important week. I think they'll be in pads maybe again tomorrow and whenever they can from here on out. And I do think that in the next 2 weeks, this quarterback derby is going to be decided.
Yeah, and I just think what stands out is how different it is with all three guys, right? Joe has the big arm. Dillon Gabriel's kind of the efficiency guy, accuracy guy, and Shedeur Sanders, I mean, let's be honest, still figuring some things out, but he will have moments. I mean, again, today you can make the case that maybe two of the better throws, and the caveat here is always who is he going against, who was he with. Two of the better throws today were from Shedeur. I just think today, Ashley, I feel better about the quarterbacks than I have over the first 4 days.
Yeah, and I wonder, too, if some of that is this was the first day we also didn't see any two-spotting. So it just, felt different in that regard with one less guy out there. We've kind of been pondering that. Is 4 QBs too much? How many reps can you really get to nail down what a guy is doing, what he needs to work on? So I think that was a big part of why it felt more cohesive, more quote-unquote normal, because it was fairly standard for what you would do for a first team, second team, third team quarterback.
Okay, we'll have full coverage of everything today. We heard from some position coaches. We heard from David Njoku. Full coverage of everything that happened here in Berea at cleveland.com/Browns.